Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Melanie Dean. I'm a psychologist, a scientist, and a Hay House author of the book, The Hidden Power of Emotions. And you're listening to the Wavemaker podcast, where we explore how your emotions are real energy waves that are more powerful than you think. And so are you. When you learn how to tap the power of your emotions, you can attract everything in life that you want. It's not just positive thinking, it's science, and I will show you how. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Melanie Dean, and today in our Wavemaker podcast, we are going to be talking about the pitfalls of positive thinking. Now, we all know how this feels when things are not quite going well for us and we have challenges and we are just trying to will ourselves to think positive, just hold a positive thought. Don't let any of those negative thoughts get in there. And it's really not working. Things are still not going well and you don't know how to change it up. So today we're going to talk about what's really happening there, and I'm going to share with you a very important mistake that people often make in their power, trying to work their power of positive thinking and attracting what they want in their life. And today, very excited, we are going to be talking with Dawson Church. He is the author of 3 books. So he is a science researcher and a science author. One of his books is called Genie in Your Genes, which really talks about that our emotions drive gene expression. Another book that Dawson has written is Mind to Matter, which really talks about how our brain shapes and creates the reality that we think is our objective reality. And the most recent book, he's working on a new one, but the most recent book he's published is called Bliss Brain, where he talks about how we can cultivate a state of true joy and happiness, regardless of our circumstances. So I want to say welcome to Dawson.
Melanie, it's a huge pleasure to be here. And if we have half as much fun in our talk now as we were having before you went live, then we'll have a great time.
Well, very good. Well, I'm happy to see you smiling and happy. And I know that that's your normal state because of all of the work that you do with meditation and tapping and all of the teachings that you do. So
Yes.
You're really focused on what our main objective is today, which is to help people when they're in this emotional distress and difficulty and challenging circumstances, how to make their power work in a way that's really helps them to manifest what they desire in their life, rather than making some common mistakes, which we'll talk about today. You are well schooled in a stress circumstances. The opening of your book, Bliss Brain, you talk about your harrowing and very narrow escape. It sounds like had you waited even a few seconds longer, you would not have escaped the fires that consumed your home in California.
Right.
I wonder if you could share with our readers what that experience was like and your response to that experience that really sheds light on your teachings and on your research about the power that we all have.
That night, it was called the Tubbs Fire, and it was a huge conflagration. It moved very, very fast. It was moving at the rate of a football field every 3 seconds. So it was a very, very fast-moving wildfire. But that particular night, there was no evidence of a fire in our area at all when we went to sleep. And then at 12:45 in the morning, my wife woke me up and she said, "Dawson, something's really wrong." And I kind of opened my eyes and looked out the window, and there was a glow on the horizon. And I dashed outside, and there was a wildfire just sweeping down the adjoining mountain toward us. And I just yelled, "We're getting out of here right away." And we literally sprinted. We just threw on the first clothes we could find, grabbed our phones and the car keys, and ran to the car. And as we drove away, all the trees above our head were bursting into flames. It was just a nightmare scenario. And so this friend snuck past the National Guard the next day, sent us photographs, and we saw these images of just concrete slabs, chimney sticking up, and absolute devastation. And so we realized the house had gone, the office had gone, all our possessions were gone.
My
And
goodness.
we were struggling for several weeks after that. I mean, we put together a kind of a semblance of normalcy. We found people offered us places to live. We went to the shelters and got food and clothing. And so we gradually began to get functional again. But it was a period of about 2 years of immense turmoil. And you just don't realize how immense that shakeup of your life is. So the whole first chapter of This Brain tells the story of the fire and the year after the fire, and just how we began to use the tools I learned, like tapping, like meditation, like energy therapies, like movement therapies. We used all of those tools to shift our awareness. And so we wound up a year after the fire not being traumatized. We definitely were. We had these immense losses. So many people had died near us. I mean, we had 8 of our neighbors die just in the houses right around us. It was definitely a time of loss and difficulty for us. And yet we began to put our lives back together again and realize that we had these tools and they really worked.
Well, it's so interesting that you are touching on all of the shift that happened, the resilience that came, that you used to get through that experience, was really an emotional shift. And in the power of positive thinking, which, we tend to activate our thinking and try to stay positive in our thinking. But really, what we know is that thinking isn't enough, that emotions matter. So, the emotional shift, why is that so important? Why is just positive thinking not enough?
Positive thinking is just an overlay on negative experience. And so if I'm having a negative experience, I'm trying to think myself into positivity, it's just an overlay on reality, which is negative, and it's not going to work. And so you have to be genuinely positive, and you try and cover up positive thinking, cover up negative experiences with positive thinking. It doesn't stick. If you go to trauma and then you release that trauma, then naturally you will start to think positively.
There's an interesting quote from Esther Hicks who talked about this. I just want to read the quote because it's kind of cute the way she phrases it. She says, in the same way that you would not put a happy face sticker on the dashboard of your vehicle to cover your fuel gauge indicator because you do not like seeing that you are out of fuel, you would not want to mask your own feelings, pretending to feel differently than you really feel. For pretending this way does nothing to change your point of attraction. The only way you can do so is to change your vibrational offering. And when you do change that offering, the way you feel changes too.
Absolutely.
So that's what you were describing.
Yeah, and you're activating new circuits that way. So we have all these brain circuits to do with stress and fear and dealing with trauma, and they're in our brains. And then we have others that help us regulate negative emotion. And in my book, This Brain, I talk about the 4 circuits of this structure that is hardwired into every human brain, which neuroscientists call the Enlightenment Network. And we have that Enlightenment Network as well. So we have both these things. We have the stress network, which I call caveman brain. We have the Enlightenment Network as well. And which one are we using? Most people are using the stress brain way too much. They're in caveman brain all the time. And it's been, 10,000 years since humanity began to do agriculture and got out of the caves and got out of the Stone Age. We're living in this as though we're in this environment full of threat. So we're inappropriately activating caveman brain. What you want to do is to engage those circuits of the Enlightenment Network, and then you start to light those up. And you get good at that, you get used to that, and that's resilience. And those dial down negative emotions, and then you have the ability to feel all the positive experiences of your life, and then you start to move into these elevated states of bliss.
So I think one way you coin that in one of your books, The Caveman Brain, I think you also describe it as default mode network, the demon brain, where we are default mode to survival, where we can misinterpret our fears and as limitations that we seem to think are real when they're not. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, and this was discovered by a neuroscientist called Marcus Rakel in the late 1990s, and they were studying like which brain regions we use for what. And he made a fascinating discovery. There was a set of brain regions which, when we didn't do a darn thing, when we were sitting there just goofing off, that turned on. And he thought, why is this turning on when we aren't doing anything? This is really mysterious. And I mean, the mysterious thing about the brain, too, has for a long time been it uses 20% of our body's energy. It's only 2% of our body's mass, but it's using 20% of our body's energy. But it's using that energy when I'm intently focused on a task, I'm doing something really difficult or elaborate or demanding. And it's using 20% of the body's energy when I am having a cup of tea, laying on the couch, doing nothing. So, what does it
Wow.
do when we aren't giving it a task to do? And it defaults to the set of brain regions. They're primarily in the front of the brain, right behind our forehead over here, like the third eye area. And in the back of our brain is, and they're in the center of our brain, but front and back primarily. And so he named this eventually the default mode network, because our brains default to this when we aren't doing a task. And the scientists now have been studying the default mode network for 25 years, figuring out what it's there for and what it does. And it does several different interesting things. One is that it builds up a picture of ourself. So my name is Dawson Church. I decided to wear a blue shirt today. I'm sitting here. I have a microphone here. I have a schedule. I have an email list. I do things with people. I'll have dinner tonight somewhere. And all of this is me. I and me. And of course, for all of us, I, me, that's the most fascinating person in the world. We're very focused on I and me and mine. And the default mode network builds that sense of self. And the corollary of that is that it's very focused on self-preservation. And to make sure that the self endures, then the default mode network focuses on things that threatened the self in the past. So what happened in the past to threaten me? That car crash, that near miss on the expressway, or the real car crash I had, or the traumatic event from the past. And might that happen again in the future? So my mortgage was underwater in 2007. Might my mortgage be underwater in 2025? And so we take our past experiences, project them into the future, and worry about the preservation of the self. And so people are miserable when they're doing this. When the default mode network is active, people are not thinking happy thoughts. And so our brain defaults to negativity. In psychology, it's called the brain's negativity bias. Our brains are, it's not just that our minds are biased to negativity, our brain function, our brains grab every spare watt of energy and they use it for the default mode network. Whenever there's any brain capacity available, it's used for self-focus and worry about the past and fear for the future. So that's why people in their normal downtime are usually not as happy as they are when they're doing a task. So that's what the brain defaults to. And that's the brain you're born with. That's why you worry, why your brain defaults to negativity, why it's so hard to create a good life for yourself. And so all of these tools like EFT, meditation, other things we do, they all help us to dial down the activity of the default mode network.
So the tools and the techniques that you teach and that I teach all help us to engage this power that we have for happiness and joy, regardless of our circumstances, and for attracting that which we want in life. In a few minutes, we're going to talk about some of the big mistakes people make in activating and using their power and this power of positive thinking. But a common question that people have, which you will be particularly attuned to be able to speak to, is that when we are trying to work our power and we are not doing it perfectly well, the common thought a lot of people have is, are they then attracting bad things that happen to them? So even in particularly light of the fire experience that you had and the financial outfall and all those things, if you could speak to that. We have all these tools to work our power for attraction. But if we don't use the tools well or correctly, are we actually attracting bad things to us that happen to us?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And there's certainly a principle of resonance going on, and resonance is found throughout the universe. If you pick up a guitar and don't play it, but someone else is playing guitar in the room, or if there's a speaker in the room, you'll feel the guitar vibrating. And so there's resonance throughout nature. There are studies I talk about in my book, Mind to Matter. And at the end of Bliss Brain, I cover them briefly as well, showing the resonance there is in the solar system. And when we are, for example, with people with whom we share emotional energy, then we resonate with them. And so there is this principle of resonance. And in that sense, we attract things because we attract things to which we're resonant. And so if I'm resonant with fear, I'll tend to attract people around me who are fearful. If I'm resonant with love, I'll tend to attract people around me who are loving. And if fearful people enter my space and I'm loving, one of two things will happen. Either they'll entrain to me and they'll start to feel loving, or they'll feel repelled by me because they're attuned to fear and they're going to go somewhere else. So that principle of resonance is one of the universal ways in which nature exchanges information. I recommend you be on that positive wavelength, that you be on that positive resonance. If you're going to resonate with something, why not pick love? Why not pick peace? Why not pick compassion and joy? And just resonate with that, resonate with all the other people resonating with that, and then you are opting out of the field of fear and opting out of the field of stress. And that field is going to do you no good. And you cannot help anybody in fear, who's in war, who's in stress, by going to stress yourself. You can do far more good by stepping out of that stress and having it at peace yourself, and then contributing, feeding the field of love, peace, and joy in the world.
So you really bring home that we are not in control of this world and our power. While we have it and can use it in most powerful ways, we cannot control everything. So you did not control and call forth with your energy, bring a fire on and destroy my home and destroy my life. And you did not attract that to you specifically. Did we as large humankind create an environment where the fire was in that area? Yes, large humankind energy contributed to that. But you also then, if we just take it down to a very personal level, real level, say at work, somebody comes into your work office and they just chew you, they bite your head off, they're mad about something, and they really just, they're angry at you or whatever, or maybe they're angry at somebody else, but all of a sudden their angry negative energy is right there in front of you. So did you call that forth? Your point, if I hear you making your point, is that your choice is what to do with that event. Did you attract it and call it forth? No, this person entered your space. What are you going to offer in exchange on an event like that?
Absolutely. And if you look at the studies on resonance, I cover quite a few of them in Mind to Matter. So when a person who is upset, who has an issue, either psychological or physical, is in the presence of a healer, the energy field of the person with the disease actually entrains to that of the healer. And if you ever meet a great guru, a great saint, a great being, and you are in their presence, you feel it and you feel the resonance of it. And so research into, for example, heart rate variability shows that when a patient comes into a session with a healer, that the patient's heart rate variability and their level of coherence, their brain coherence, their heart coherence, is really disordered. And I have EEGs showing this in Mind to Matter. And you will see, if you look at their EEG patterns, they're all dysregulated. They're all over the place. Those of the healer are really highly coherent. And what happens is you go into the presence of that person, and if yours are dysregulated, they are regulated by the presence of that other person who is coherent. So people who are in that space of love, who are in the space of kindness, of compassion, actually help regulate the emotions of those around them. And that's the whole field I cover in chapter 2 of Mind to Matter, which is emotional contagion. And just the way we study the spread of viruses and bacteria, we use that model, epidemiology, to look at the spread of emotions. And it turns out that emotions are highly contagious. And if I walk around and I'm just beaming with love and I'm laughing and I'm just happy for no reason and I'm kind. Like I walked into the grocery store the other day and there was a man who works there who I see every few months. I just see him. He's in the wine department, actually. He's the wine buyer and he's a wine genius. He's a super taster. He's one of those amazing guys with wine. And so I trust his wine recommendations. But I walked in and he was stacking some shelves. He looked toward me. He didn't recognize me at first. And he looked angry. He looked tired. He looked exhausted. He looked out of sorts. And so I talked to him for a few moments and I could see the light coming on in his eyes. And then after a while, I said something funny. He said something funny back. And after a while, we were having a wonderful time. His whole energy shifted. And then I was buying 4 cases of wine for an event we have coming up. And then I walked out. He yelled out at me. After me, he said, "Don't drink it all on the way home."
Well, you would sure help to shift his mood. That's for sure.
That's emotional contagion. That's emotional
Yes.
contagion. We can be agents of emotional contagion on a huge scale. In fact, research shows that if I am kind and loving and compassionate and happy, it affects my neighbor. My neighbor is about 35% more likely to be happy if I'm happy. And her neighbor, who I don't even know, is about 15% more likely to be happy. And his neighbor, who I certainly don't know, is about 6% more likely to be happy.
Mhm.
So happiness spreads out in this contagious way in
Yes.
communities.
Well, I love the discussion that you brought forth, and I talk about that in detail in my book, The Hidden Power of Emotions, which is the shift that we make in our emotions, where some emotions, well, the electromagnetic energy that results from the molecules of emotions in our body, they look like what they feel like. So they're emotions that have a very smooth, calm, even energy wave pattern, which are your emotions of love and caring and compassion and quiet clarity for yourself, compassion for others. Those emotions generate a very smooth, calm, even energy wave pattern. And that can easily get in sync with other similar energy waves. And physicists actually say that they sniff each other out, other similar energy, which communicates both inside our body and outside our body. So I want to just shift a little bit in our conversation to give our listeners a little bit of a taste of what is a very common mistake that most people make, which I call wishful thinking. So if we go back to the example that you just said of your wine friend who was having a bad day before you came in, or the person at work and somebody comes and yells at them in their office. So they likely are engaged in some thinking that says, I sure wish I didn't have to deal with this. And they have a desire for something different in their life. Maybe they want a different job. Maybe they want more money. Maybe they want to work for a different boss. Maybe they want a different work environment. So wishful thinking is when you just stay with those fleeting thoughts and you don't allow an emotional shift to happen. So the emotional shift where you can create those energy waves that are smooth and calm and even, that come about as a result of meditation, of tapping, of calming your mind and body, and being clear with a vision for that which you truly want. Those energy waves are now powerful instead of being fleeting, where you're just not really believing what you want can happen. You tap into your fears of all the reasons why it wouldn't happen and couldn't happen, and you stay there. And you never really settle into a place of being able to calm your mind, calm your body, and clearly envision and give power to that which you really want, so that those energy waves can get in sync and they share encoded information at a quantum physics level. They communicate both inside you and outside you. And they then, and you speak to this in your book, you call it accessing the non-local mind. I speak to it in terms of when those energy waves get in sync and they share encoded information at a quantum level, that they are allowing you access, because those energy waves now are operating as a single unit. They stay connected to you, and you now have access to the wisdom that is the intuitive guidance that allows you to know what choices are right for you, that really are in resonance with what you're visioning for yourself, and which choices are not in resonance with what you're really visioning for yourself. So the concept of resonance really does speak to getting past the wishful thinking stage, settling into the coherence and the calm and the resonance.
Yep. And there's that old saying in England that if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. And so, yeah, just thinking
Yes.
it, just make it so. So I asked that question at the end of Mind Matter. I say that people visualize and affirm, use affirmation visualization. And I talked about some friends of mine, talked about Jack Canfield in particular. Jack Canfield wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. I've noticed Jack is a master manifester. Then I also have had friends who have really done all the same kinds of techniques. They've used manifestation. They've used visualization. They have vision boards. They have affirmation cards. All the same techniques that Jack does, and none of it happens. And I ask in Mind to Matter, what's the difference? They're both visualizing. They're both affirming. They're both using all these same tools. One is a master manifester. The other is not manifesting much at all. And so I talk about that same principle you're talking about, Melanie, of resonance, but in terms of brain waves. We hook them up to an EEG. When we hook people up to an EEG like Jack, we see highly coherent brain waves. And so they're bringing the power of coherent mind,
and the coherence are those
brain function.
Those are those smooth, evenly spaced waves. That's what we call the coherent brain waves. Just to clarify for our listeners.
Yeah, those people who aren't able to manifest, they have incoherent brain waves. And then the image I use to illustrate the difference is light. If you have an incandescent light, it sheds light. I have like a 60-watt bulb here in my office, and that'll light up the whole office. But it's non-coherent light. Those light waves are scattered around in random directions. It works, but all it does is light up an office. If you take 60 watts of light and you train those light waves in coherence, so now they're being emitted coherently. That form of coherent light is a laser, and that same 60 watts will cut through a sheet of steel. That's the power of coherence, and that's why I say that get into coherence. Use my method, eco meditation. It puts you into heart coherence, then in deep coherence. Use tapping to release your stress. That's the way you get into those coherent states, and you then become a manifestor or a creator.
So this really touches on another mistake that people often make, and I call it the happiness myth. And the mistake is to believe that you will be happy when something happens, when you get the raise you've been wanting, when you finally get to go on this vacation you've been dreaming about, when the health of your loved one improves. So when something happens, then you will be happy. So this is a myth that you and I both have discussed in different ways, and the importance of really knowing that you can have happiness, you can cultivate happiness, and you talk about that word, you bring forth that word a lot in your book, Bliss Brain, but you can cultivate the happiness that allows you to feel a core amount of contentment, happiness, and resilience within you, regardless of your circumstances.
Well, think about happy people. There's a monk called Mathieu Ricard. The Smithsonian Magazine called him the world's happiest man based on his brainwaves. And they study him in MRIs. They've done a lot of research now with monks, Tibetan monks, also Franciscan nuns, also Qigong masters, shamans, people from all different religions and parts of the world. And they have these brainwaves that indicate extreme happiness. And that happiness, Melanie, is so far above what the average person is able to imagine is possible that most people actually don't know it's possible to get that happy. But we see a rise of 700% in their happy brainwaves. And so these monks
Well, I
are
want some of
just
that. That sounds good.
absolutely 700%
I'm in for
rise
that.
in happiness brainwaves. And these aren't questionnaires that finding out. These are objective scientific measures of brain function. This is an incredibly happy brain. Think about that monk, okay? Has he ever had a raise?
No, that monk has likely never had a raise.
No, he's celibate.
Unless he got to grow a
no,
few more feet of vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. That's about as far as he can aspire to. And then no wife, no kids, no family. So he has none of those things to bolster him. He doesn't own a darn thing. He doesn't even own the saffron robe he's wearing. When he dies, that'll be incinerated along with his body or given to washed and given to another fledgling monk. So these people with nothing, objectively, they have nothing. And objectively, I had nothing after the fire, and yet I was in bliss. And so you don't need anything to be in that state. Now, the paradox here is that you're wiring and firing the Enlightenment Network. So you're moving yourself out of the default mode network, and the two function in relationship to each other. When the default mode network function is high, when you're stressed, when you're into yourself, the Enlightenment Network is low. When the Enlightenment Network is engaged by meditation, the default mode network goes way down. So now you're meditating, you're feeling wonderful, you've lit up the Enlightenment Network in your brain, you're resonating with the universe, you're in this incredibly happy state, you're attracting happy people around you, and all of the things that you need, you find just come to you. And in miraculous ways, there's the money to support you, there are the friends to love you, there are all this life circumstances that support you being you, and you don't have to work very hard at them. So it's a wonderful space to be in, is to light up that Enlightenment Network, live up there.
And not to mention the great effect of bliss brain, of being able to live in that joyful place and
Absolutely.
to have confidence of getting through difficulties and challenges. And certainly you don't want them in your life. You're not asking for those difficulties and challenges, but you have confidence and resilience and joy and a core happiness in being able to navigate them. So thank you so much, Dawson Church, for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and your energy, your thoughts. Where can people find you if they look on the internet and they want to learn more about what you have to offer? Where will they go?
One is to get a copy of the book at blissbrain.com. And at blissbrain.com, you get the book for free. You pay shipping and handling. And you also get access to 8 free meditations. And those are really wonderful meditations. We've shown in MRI research, they start to reshape your brain within a month.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today, Dawson.
What a joy. I love doing this. It's my life work. And I jump out of bed every morning so excited. I can't even wait to start the day.
Okay, well, we will do this again at another time also. So thank you very much.
It's been a joy. Thank you.
Yes. That's all for today's Wavemaker podcast. Thank you for listening. I have so much more to share with you, so be sure to tune in next month. And remember, go to my website, www.melaniedean.com, and join our free Wavemaker community, where you will receive even more science-backed advice for unlocking your emotional power.